Have you ever wondered why a man can forget dozens of faces, but never the one woman who looked at him like she knew his soul? Not because of her beauty, not because of her body, but because she said something, or more precisely, whispered something into his psyche that activated the ancient longing buried deep within his masculine unconscious. These are not mere words. These are keys, forged in the fire of the feminine soul, sharpened by centuries of silence, waiting to be remembered by the woman brave enough to speak them. They are the words that pierce through his armor, bypass his pride, and land directly in the realm where the animus meets the sacred feminine, where his hunger for conquest dissolves into a deeper yearning, to be seen, to be known, to be transformed. Because the truth is, every man is at war. Internally, he is caught between the instinct to dominate and the soul's deeper ache to dissolve in devotion, between the drive for power and the craving for peace, between his fear of the feminine and his secret worship of her. And most women never see this. They chase validation, they perform, they abandon themselves in the hope that he will notice, claim, and adore them. But there is another kind of woman, a rare woman. A woman who understands that obsession is not about manipulation, it's about invocation. She doesn't beg for his attention, she summons his soul. And she does it not by speaking louder or giving more, but by becoming a mirror so fierce, so feminine, and so still that he sees himself reflected in her and cannot look away, because she speaks not to the man he pretends to be, but to the man he could become. The 5 words are not formulas, they are archetypal frequencies. They emerge from the depths of a woman who has met her own shadow, who has danced with her own inner masculine, who has walked through her own underworld and returned not bitter, but embodied. When she speaks, it's not the surface of her mouth that moves, it's the current of her being. She looks at him and says, "I see the fire in you," and he is undone. Not because of flattery, but because no one has ever dared to name what he himself has denied. These 5 words hold power not because they feed his ego, but because they confront his truth. They stir his archetype, the warrior, the king, the lover, the magician. He suddenly remembers that he was meant for something, that his anger has purpose, that his desire can be sanctified, that his chaos can be claimed. And the woman who speaks these words, she is not needy, she is not reactive, she is not available to just anyone. She walks like water and burns like incense. She is the synthesis of Aphrodite and Athena, the convergence of Eros and Logos. A woman who has taken her pain and turned it into poetry, her heartbreak into initiation. She does not use her voice to convince, she uses it to conjure. When she speaks, he hears something ancient, something he thought was lost, the echo of his mother's love, the ache of the first goddess he dreamed of as a boy, the ache to kneel without shame. It terrifies him, it awakens him, it binds him. And yet, he doesn't feel trapped, he feels chosen, because obsession in its highest form is not addiction to a person. It's a man's soul recognizing the gatekeeper to his own evolution, and only a woman who has stepped into her own power can hold that gate open without losing herself. Most women lower their frequency to chase approval, but the woman who holds him in a state of divine obsession, she rises and demands that he rise with her. She becomes the mirror of his hidden greatness, the reminder that he is not just flesh and instinct, but also myth and meaning. And when she speaks those 5 words, not from need, but from knowing, something ancient stirs in him. His nervous system recognizes her. His psyche rearranges itself around her. She becomes unforgettable, not because she begged, but because she saw him. And in that gaze, he remembered who he truly was. A man does not become obsessed with a woman who gives herself away too easily. He becomes obsessed with the one who disrupts his internal order, who reveals to him, without force, that the world he has mastered is small compared to the realm she carries within her. She is not louder than his ambition. She is deeper than it, because her words, especially these 5, don't entertain him. They awaken him. They rattle the cage he didn't know he lived in. They invite him to feel, to imagine, to long, not just for her, but for the part of himself that only she seems to recognize. Carl Jung taught that the soul of a man is feminine, the anima, and in his dreams she appears not as a perfect woman, but as a symbol, a messenger, a mirror of his own repressed light and shadow. She seduces not with her body, but with her mystery. She says little, but what she says echoes through eternity. And so when a real woman, alive and breathing, speaks to him in the frequency of his anima, not just with flirtation, but with fire, he doesn't just want her, he needs her, because her presence makes him feel whole, not coddled, not mothered, not idolized, but met. When she says those words, perhaps I see the fire in you, or you are not what they think, or I trust your power, it is not about flattery. It is an invocation. She is speaking from the depths of her own self-knowledge. From her own marriage to the masculine within. She is not trying to control him. She is calling him forth, and he will feel this in his bones. He may resist at first. He may run. He may rebel. Because no man feels safe when the soul is stirred. No man feels calm when the false identity begins to crumble. But obsession is rarely born from calm. It is born from contrast, from the collision between the life he has and the life he suddenly longs for. And that longing has her face. Because she holds the frequency of what he wants most, but cannot name. Redemption through intimacy, transcendence through connection, resurrection through being seen and still respected. She is not a fantasy. She is not perfection. She is real, and in her realness, sacred. Her eyes say, I see what you hide. Her voice says, I'm not afraid of it. Her body says, I'm not here to tame you. I'm here to ignite you. This is what makes a man obsessed, not her availability, not her beauty, not her submission, but her sovereignty. Her words are sovereign, and they remind him of a kingdom he abandoned. He remembers what it felt like to believe in himself, to walk like a king, to protect rather than control, to serve something higher than ego, to pursue something deeper than status. He remembers it all in a flash, and the source is her. That's why he keeps checking his phone, why he replays the last conversation, why he scrolls her photos but feels like none of them fully capture her, because what she said cannot be captured. It lives in his bloodstream now, in his dreams, in his hunger. It's not lust, it's not romance, it's recognition. And once a man has tasted recognition, ordinary attention will never satisfy him again. But not every woman can offer this. Only the woman who has recognized herself, who has faced her shadows, reclaimed her wounds, and no longer waits for a man to complete her, can speak the words that make a man obsessed, because only she is brave enough to speak from truth, not strategy. Only she knows that feminine power is not in pleasing, it is in piercing. And the man who is ready, the man who is on the edge of his next becoming, will not just hear her, he will follow her voice back to himself. What happens to a man when a woman stops performing and starts embodying? He senses it before she speaks, before she smiles, before she even looks his way. It's in the stillness of her presence, the quiet command she carries in her spine, the way she listens not just with her ears, but with her essence, as if she's not merely receiving his words, but reading the spaces between them. She doesn't chase attention, because her attention is currency. She doesn't rush to fill silences, because her silence says more than most women's screams. And when she finally speaks, especially those 5 words, she doesn't just speak to him, she speaks through him. Her voice becomes the wind that stirs the deepest waters of his being. He will never admit it, not at first, but something inside him begins to tremble, not in fear of her, but in fear of what she awakens. Because a woman like this doesn't just stir desire, she stirs remorse. She stirs memory. She stirs the boy he once was, the man he tried to bury, the hunger he's tried to silence with distractions, conquests, and success. He may try to maintain his composure, to continue playing the game, to test her boundaries, to provoke her insecurities. But when she stands unmoved, when she smiles without seduction, when she looks at him not with desperation but with clarity, he begins to fall, not for her body, not for her validation, but for the mirror she holds. The mirror that says, "I see what you could be," and suddenly no other woman compares, because they all play in the shallow end, and she is the ocean. Carl Jung wrote that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. But she is the soul he's been avoiding, the soul he's been starving for, the soul that doesn't need to scream, because her energy whispers truths louder than any performance. This is why 5 words from her can carry more power than 1,000 from any other. It's not about the words themselves. It's the place they're spoken from a woman who has grieved her illusions, from a woman who has buried the girl who begged to be chosen, from a woman who has looked into her own abyss and come back with gold in her hands. She is not trying to be the one. She already knows she is, and her knowing is contagious. He begins to crave her certainty, her steadiness, her refusal to collapse in the face of his confusion. She becomes the fixed star in the chaos of his world, and whether he wants to or not, he orbits her, because something in her defies the gravity of modern femininity. She doesn't beg to be needed. She doesn't offer herself as a solution. She doesn't twist into shapes to prove she's worthy. She simply is. She embodies the truth that a man's obsession doesn't come from control or comfort. It comes from mystery anchored in mastery. He may not understand it. He may not know why her words haunt him, why her gaze lingers behind his eyelids, why her scent seems to follow him in dreams. But he knows this: he cannot go back. Because once a man has heard a woman speak to the king within him, he can no longer tolerate being treated like a peasant. Once he's been seen not as a project, but as a portal, a sacred force of creation, direction, and power, he starts to rise, not to impress her, but to meet her. And that, perhaps, is the secret no one dares to say. The feminine does not chase obsession. She calls it. She commands it, not through domination, but through devotion to her own depth. She doesn't ask, "Will he like me?" She asks, "Is he ready to rise to this level of truth?" And if the answer is no, she lets him go, not from bitterness, but from wisdom. Because she knows, a man not ready for her words is not ready for her world. There is a silence that follows her departure. Not the kind that fades, the kind that echoes. Long after she's walked away, her presence lingers, not in his hands, but in his mind. And that is where obsession truly begins, not in possession, but in absence. Because he cannot unhear what she said. Her 5 words still burn through his defenses like wildfire through dry grass. "I see the fire in you," or maybe it was, "You were made for more." Or the devastating simplicity of, "I trust your soul's direction." Whatever she chose, it was never random. It was surgical, and because it came from a woman rooted in her own inner knowing, it hit with the force of revelation. You see, the masculine craves clarity, but not just any clarity. He craves the kind that only the feminine oracle can offer, the kind that cuts through illusion, speaks to essence, and leaves him undone and remade. She never needed to convince him of her value. She simply mirrored his until he couldn't bear to look away. And this is what makes her unforgettable. She is not a destination. She is an invitation to return to himself, to the part of him buried under expectation, trauma, pressure, pride, to the boy who once dreamt of becoming a hero, to the man who secretly longs to kneel, not in submission but in sacred devotion. Not every man will answer this call. Some will retreat, some will mock, some will ghost, sabotage, disappear. but even they will remember. Because once a man has been spoken to from soul, he is marked, and the woman who marked him, she isn't waiting. She has already moved on, not out of spite, but out of sacred motion. She knows she is a current, not a cage, and her love, when offered, is never about fixing him. It's about facing him, not with blame, but with blessing, the kind of blessing that says, I will not shrink for your comfort. I will not play small so you can feel big. I will not pretend not to see you, because I do see you, but I will walk away if you refuse to see yourself. That is the power of her 5 words. They are the last thing he hears before she closes the door, not to punish him, but to protect the temple of her heart. She does not chase, she does not cling, she does not collapse, because she has done her inner work. She has faced her own masculine wounds, the fathers who abandoned, the lovers who lied, the inner voice that once whispered, "You are not enough." She has burned those lies to ash and risen sovereign. Now she speaks from a different place, not from need, but from truth. And the truth is this: when a woman speaks from the depth of her integrated feminine, the world bends to listen. And a man, no matter how distracted, no matter how proud, no matter how closed, feels it. He may not respond, he may not act, but the frequency of her presence embeds itself in his soul, like a symbol in a dream. He can date a dozen others, sleep with them, laugh with them, but none of them know his soul's name like she did. None of them looked into his chaos and said, "There's a king in there." None of them left with dignity instead of drama. And so he obsesses, not because she made him, but because she awakened him. And that awakening doesn't go away. It deepens. It haunts. It becomes the measure by which he evaluates every other woman, not in comparison, but in conviction. He now knows what truth feels like in feminine form, and he cannot unknow it. There comes a moment, often in silence, often in solitude, when the man finally breaks. Not publicly, not proudly, not in a grand gesture she will ever see, but alone. It is there, in the midnight hours of his psyche, that her words return not as memory, but as mirror. He hears them again, not through his ears, but through the ache. 5 simple words, yet they are heavy with archetype, loaded with symbols older than speech, forged in the crucible of her own inner alchemy. They contain him, not the man he has shown the world, but the man he's been running from. And now there is nowhere left to run, because she saw something in him, and unlike every other woman before, she named it, not with hope, not with flattery, but with knowing. She knew the sacred tension he carried, between his raw power and his buried tenderness, between his destructive instinct and his creative potential. She didn't judge it. She didn't try to fix it. She simply held it, in one gaze, in one sentence, in one presence. And then she left, not with anger, but with the elegance of someone who refuses to linger where truth is not honored. And that is what pierced him, because most women stay long past their own dignity. They offer more, give more, explain more, hoping to be chosen, but she chose herself. She gave him a glimpse of the divine, and then she walked away without apology. And now he is left with the echo of her voice, and the shame of his smallness. He remembers her patience, her poise, the depth of her silence, the way her eyes saw everything and said nothing. It was never about control, it was about capacity, her ability to hold the full spectrum of his being and not collapse. The truth is, most men live in a state of fragmentation. Their masculinity is uninitiated, their soul neglected, their emotions buried beneath layers of distraction. But when he met her, something shifted. She didn't offer comfort, she offered clarity. She didn't soothe his wounds, she named them, and in doing so, she became the symbol of the feminine redeemer, not the fantasy girl who plays nice and feeds his ego, but the sacred disruptor who dares to call him to a higher self. Carl Jung knew this archetype well. She is the anima in her highest form, the guide, the soul-bringer, the flame that leads him inward. and obsession. It is the masculine's response to the mystery that cannot be claimed, only entered through reverence. He obsesses because he wants to return, not just to her arms, but to the feeling of being that close to truth, to power, to soul, to meaning. And he begins to realize it was never really about her. It was about the man he became in her presence. She didn't make him feel like a god. She made him feel like a man worthy of being godlike, noble, focused, clear, capable of devotion, not just domination. She made him remember, and now he can't forget. So he replays her voice in his head, imagines how it would feel to hold her now, not from hunger, but from honor. He wonders if he could find her again, not just in body, but in spirit. If he could rise to meet her, not from desperation, but from depth. And he knows the answer lies not in chasing her, but in becoming the man she spoke to, the one hidden behind his fears, the one buried beneath performance, the one who heard her 5 words and knew she was right. There is fire in him, and he has been afraid of it. But now he cannot be, because her words lit a match, and he is finally willing to burn. Somewhere deep within him he begins the journey back, not to her doorstep, but to his own center, because the truth she gave him, wrapped in those 5 words, was never meant to tether him to her. It was meant to unleash him from his illusions. And now he walks differently, no longer driven solely by conquest or performance, but by clarity. No longer seeking validation, but embodiment. No longer lost in the endless noise of masculinity defined by dominance, but finally tuned to the rhythm of inner power, of meaning, of self-command. And this is her legacy. Not that she held on to him, but that she let go with such sacred force that he had no choice but to confront who he truly was. That's what a woman in her truth does. She doesn't make a man obsessed by offering him everything. She makes him obsessed by revealing what he could be, and then requiring that he meet it, not for her, but for himself, because she does not exist to complete a man's story, she exists to ignite it. And if he cannot walk with her at that frequency, she will walk on, without resentment, without revenge, without collapse, because she knows her soul is not here to convince a man of her worth. It is here to awaken his own. And once awakened, he will never be the same. Even if he finds another, even if he marries another, even if decades pass, her voice will live in the architecture of his becoming, in the way he speaks more truth, in the way he honors his own depth, in the way he one day teaches his son that real strength is not in control, but in courage, the courage to feel, the courage to rise, the courage to be seen fully. And it all began with her, the woman who didn't flinch when he was fragmented, the woman who didn't wait to be chosen, the woman who simply saw him and spoke 5 words that became the thread stitching him back together. She didn't win him. She didn't need to, because her love was never a transaction. It was a transmission, a reminder that obsession is not about possession, it is about resonance. And the highest form of resonance is the soul calling the soul home. So let her remember this. She does not need to perform. She does not need to beg. She does not need to silence her truth in order to be desired. She need only remember who she is and speak from there, because when she does, her words do not just touch a man's ears, they brand his soul. And no matter how far he runs, no matter how long it takes, he will carry her frequency inside him forever. Not because she tried to be unforgettable, but because she was. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.